So, are we allowed to think aloud here?
Yes, yes, you're allowed to think as aloud as you
Isn't it
can.
just natural for a Christian dominant government to naturally not like the opposite or a religion that it's not theirs?
I don't think we have a Christian dominant government. We have a Christian majority country. That's the reality. But I never view America as a Christian dominant government. I think
But when the
uh-huh,
separate when the politicians, like,
yeah.
as individuals, are um abided by, or they're with Christianity, or they're Christian, and don't you think that plays a role in how they serve as lawmakers and as governors?
Everybody has personal biases. If you have a
Right,
majority
yeah, that's what I'm
Muslim,
saying. It's just
right? If you have
natural.
a majority Muslim, but so everyone has personal biases. Those are the things that you can't get away with.
Exactly.
Um, but here's the thing, right? I think I don't believe that American foreign policy is a reflection of Christian members of American government. I think American foreign policy is really based on American interests. Number one, it's
Well, I'll give you Israel. Israel is a huge example of how it seems to be like, evangelicals are huge believers that once Jews are in charge of Jerusalem, that is when Jesus will come back. And so, out of everywhere in the world that America
yeah,
and
but that's a
Europe,
but
yeah, out of everywhere in the world that America and Europe could have given land to them, they decided to give them land in Jerusalem just because they want Jesus to come back.
well, America didn't give them the land; it was the British, and you have to remember that the British aren't very religious people. Like if you look at European countries are probably the most religious people in the world, and and even British foreign policy today, or even back in the day, at the establishment, it wasn't because they were Christians and trying to create the rapture that would come back. I don't think that was the establishment of the state of Israel was because of Christians believing in rapture. I think there are evangelicals now who believe that and will push government for that. Yes, there's no doubt. I don't think the establishment of the state of Israel was about the rapture. It was a whole host of issues that took place that impacted the establishment of the state of Israel. I don't believe, my personal opinion, that it is religion that's number one that that motivates American foreign policy. I really don't think so. I think it's interests because I see it. I mean, I'm around it. It's interests, financial interests of every country. It's military interests of every country. It is power interests of every country, the people who are ruling it. It's all of those. It's a very complex, and I think the best thing that we can do for ourselves as communities is to understand the complexity of these issues. That that the more we make them simple, we're not doing a service for our communities. We're not actually encouraging people to then go actually change and work towards changing these institutions. We are essentially when we make it simple, we're essentially throwing up the white flag and saying we can't change it. This is the reality, and that's it. When we understand that it's complex, that there are personal biases, that there are interests, there's values, there's so much at play here. There's corporations, there's a host of interests in this world that runs policies, that forms policies. For instance, look at something as basic as the as a bill in Congress to support COVID, support Americans during COVID-19. We have gone now almost 8 months without a stimulus bill to support Americans during COVID. When Americans have lost millions of jobs, when Americans, we gave $1,200 to people initially. We have not given anything to people, and we were shutting down restaurants and businesses. Why do a simple bill that says, here's another $1,200 or $2,000 or $1,000 a month until this pandemic is over? Because of the host of interests that are there. The corporations won't let it happen. Businesses won't let it happen. Faith groups, there's so many competing interests. One is saying, oh, the corporations want financial, they want to be immune from any lawsuits that people might bring against them after the pandemic. They can't agree to have $600 or $1,200 to give to people. Why is that? A simple thing. You would think that would be the simplest form of governance, rather than like East peace or dictatorships in the Middle East, because of the different, unfortunately, interests that go into making a bill like that. So if an issue like that has all these interests, now imagine the billions of dollars involved in foreign policy, corporations, military interests, economic interests, powerful interests. All of that is what drives policies, not just black and white kind of causes. And I think if we understand that better, then we can engage systems and engage governments in ways that will allow us to have more influence rather than just kind of giving up and putting up the white flag.
Huh. Don't you think that lobbying is kind of the root of this evil that's going on in America? I mean, lobbying, all it is basically bribing. It's bribery.
No, I think, yeah.
Can we ever get rid of lobbying? No, I don't.
Yeah, I feel very strongly about this. I think money in politics, and lobbying includes money in politics, is eroding our system really bad, because it keeps a gridlock. So if the corporations, for instance, I've been looking at, recently at this bill that's trying to be passed in Congress to limit, slave labor that comes out of China for American products or imports. And it's specifically to address the issue of the Uyghurs, so that the Chinese government can't purposely use slave labor to make products that are imported or exported to America. And when you look at it, like, there are people who are trying to do the right things, members of Congress. They want to pass this bill. Nike, Apple, and all of these companies are fighting hard to do what? To weaken the bill. They're fighting hard to weaken the bill. So it's impacting. So, and money in politics, it has impacted American politics very negatively. And I think if one of the things that we can do for American governance and politics in hopefully the long term or short term is to take money out of it. And that includes lobbying.
Yeah, 100%. And I want to talk to you also about one last thing. The term Islamophobia, because allow me to go on a little rant here.
Sure.
I personally think, and it's based off of, and you can, obviously, I did this entire show where you are allowed to change my mind on what I believe or the conclusions that I've come to so far in my life. I mean, you just completely changed my mind on whether, American politicians have an anti-Islamic agenda. So I am completely open-minded to hearing different things, but the thing that I've come to in the way my thoughts have, what my thoughts have concluded on this issue of Islamophobia is, I don't think it's a good term. I don't think the term Islamophobia is a good term for us to use as Muslims in America, especially if we're trying to ignite change, because first we have to question who created the word, who created the term Islamophobia. Was it a Muslim? Was it a Muslim that had Islam and Muslim Americans in their best interest? Or was it a liberal non-Muslim politics or media folk that wanted to add Muslims under their agenda and just have Muslims constantly voting Democratic and have them, we're totally anti, Islamophobes and all this stuff? It's like, well, I think if Islamophobia was a term that worked, then the Prophet, peace be upon him, and other people throughout history would have used similar terms, but they never did. In fact, the only thing that they would mention if someone was deeply against Muslims was ignorance, and even then they would use it in the most extreme in the most extreme of circumstances, but usually they would look at someone who hates them and love them. So
Mhm.
I find that my generation is going to start becoming lazy in addressing people who hate
Yeah.
Muslims. So when someone comes up to them and tells them the Quran's from Satan, I literally have friends of mine who
Right.
believe that the
Right.
Quran is from Satan, and
Mhm.
when they tell them that Islam is naturally violent, and your only conclusion is to call them an Islamophobe, how is that helping us integrate, and how is that helping us, you know, further in this country? It's not at all. I think Islamophobia as a term is deeply lazy. And it doesn't help us at all, because if anything, once you put yourself in a situation where you are labeling, categorizing, and even demeaning in a way someone for something that is not even what they're saying is wrong. It is wrong that they're saying that Islam is violent
Right.
and all these things. Doesn't give you the right to call them an Islamophobe. They're not necessarily afraid of you. They just have their opinions on you. And so what do you
Right.
think of that? Am I wrong on that?
No, I won't disagree with you on that. To be very honest with you, I don't think Islamophobia is the perfect term. I don't think. I think it was very when it was created. A term is a term that came out of kind of academic circles in Europe when they were trying to study the trends of anti-Muslim sentiment. Right, so you saw a rise in anti-Muslim sentiment happen when they were trying to look at the trends around that. That was the word that they came up with, and they used for research purposes mainly, to be honest with you, and writing research and writing purposes. And then folks in the UN started to use it as well. Kofi Annan was the first UN Secretary General to use the term Islamophobia because he, after 9/11, especially the rise in hate against Muslims, so he wanted to word term to it that it can use in reports and issue query committees and invest money towards. So I'm not going to disagree with you on the term being inadequate. I don't think the term is perfect. I think you're right that when you just anyone who has any concern or any fear and you label them as an Islamophobe, you're not doing yourself and the community or Islam any service. I think you're right there. I think we have to be careful who are the actual people who hate Islam and Muslims, which is a very small group, which I think is a cottage industry. You have people like Alan West, Pamela Geller, Steve Emerson, these people, um, crazy, or like extreme people, right? Those are people who actually hate Muslims, there's no doubt, and that they do it out of an agenda. And whatever type of agenda, it could be a financial, political, whatever agenda that is, they're doing it out of that. The absolute majority of people have never met a Muslim. They don't have a Muslim neighbor. When they meet someone personal, and the Washington Post every year did polls of sentiments towards Muslim. The one thing that was the the people who had personal relationships with Muslims were much less likely to hate Muslims. It's a reality. If I know you, you're cool. Hey, like I'm not gonna think you're a problem, or I should hate you. So I agree that the word is limiting. I agree that the word can make us a bit lazy, but I understand why people used it. I understand why research and academic and media purposes. When you talk about like anti-Semitism or anti-black racism, or when you look at anti-immigrant racism, there's labels that need to be done for academic research purposes, for government purposes, for identification purposes. Those I understand why people use them, but I also agree that it is a very limiting term and it is not a perfect term.
Yeah, and it's good for academic circles because it's, you're not going to sit there defining everything when you're doing writing, when you're writing a research
Right,
paper on it. So you might as
exactly.
well just label
And
it
I think that's
xenophobe.
where it came from, to be honest with you. And also, then the media picked up on it because it was easy, right?
Hmm.
So when the media can report on Islamophobic incidents or the trends in Islamophobia. So it comes from because we have identified other trends. We have homophobia, we have anti-Semitism, black racism, all the stuff like that. Islamophobia became one of those forms. So when you go to conferences and you do civil rights work, you're able to identify it easier than to like put out this whole description. And I think that's where there's good intentions, but you're right in what it is limiting in.
Yeah,